Did you know that over 3 million Australians are at risk of losing their homes by 2026? That's not a prediction. It's a real warning from economists, housing experts, and financial institutions. Mortgage stress is skyrocketing. Rents have hit record highs, and entire families are being forced into their cars, tents, or temporary shelters. But here's the scary part. This crisis isn't just about money. It's about broken systems, failed policies, and disasters no one saw coming. So, what's really going on? Why are hardworking Australians being pushed out of their own homes? And what happens if nothing changes? In this video, we uncover 10 shocking reasons why Australia's housing crisis is spiraling out of control and what could happen next. Stay with us till the end because this isn't just about statistics. This is about your future.
Number 1. The interest rate avalanche. Imagine buying your dream home only to realize a year later you can't afford to live in it. That's the harsh reality hundreds of thousands of Australian homeowners are now facing, all thanks to the interest rate avalanche. Since 2022, the Reserve Bank of Australia, or RBA, has raised interest rates 13 times, pushing the cash rate from a record low 0.1% to over 4% in just 2 years. For many households, that means mortgage repayments have doubled, sometimes even tripled. Let's break it down. A family paying $2,000 a month in 2021 could now be paying $3,500 or more for the exact same house. And with wages barely moving, thousands are being pushed into mortgage stress, where more than 30% of their income goes straight to the bank. It's not just numbers on a screen. People are skipping meals, canceling insurance, and selling off assets just to keep the roof over their heads. Even worse, fixed-rate mortgage cliffs are now hitting. Homeowners who locked in low interest rates are suddenly switching to much higher variable rates, almost overnight. Many of them simply can't keep up, and banks are starting to foreclose. And the ripple effect? More forced sales, falling home values, and an unstable market that affects everyone, even renters. This isn't just a personal finance issue. It's a national emergency in slow motion. So if you thought interest rates only matter to investors and economists, think again. They could be the very reason millions of Australians end up homeless by 2026.
Number 2. Rental market meltdown. Can you imagine working full-time and still not being able to afford rent? That's now the new normal for millions of Australians. Australia's rental market is in complete meltdown. Vacancy rates in major cities like Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane have dropped below 1%, the lowest in decades. And when demand is that high, what happens next? Prices explode. In just the last 12 months, average rents have risen by over 10% nationally, with some suburbs seeing increases of up to 30%. Tenants are now being forced into bidding wars, offering hundreds of dollars above the asking price just to secure a roof over their heads. And it's not just capital cities. Regional Australia, once seen as a cheaper, quieter alternative, is now facing the same crisis. Locals are being pushed out as urban dwellers move in, bringing big city prices with them. The situation is especially dire for young people, single parents, and low-income workers. Even nurses, teachers, and police officers are struggling to find affordable homes near their workplaces. And here's the worst part. Renters have no safety net. Eviction notices can arrive with little warning. Landlords, facing rising mortgage costs themselves, are passing the pressure directly onto tenants. Some families are now living in cars. Others are bouncing between temporary accommodations with no idea where they'll sleep next week. This isn't just a housing issue. It's a humanitarian crisis. If renting is no longer affordable and buying is out of reach, where are Australians supposed to live? And if nothing changes, by 2026, being a renter in Australia may not just be expensive, it may become impossible.
Number 3. Stagnant wages versus soaring costs. What happens when everything gets more expensive, but your paycheck stays the same? Welcome to the daily reality for millions of Australians. Over the last few years, we've seen the cost of living skyrocket, from groceries and fuel to utilities and, most critically, housing. Yet while prices climb at a record pace, wages have barely moved. Let's look at the numbers. The average wage growth in Australia has been sitting around 3 to 4%, but inflation has surged past 7% at its peak. That means you're effectively earning less every year, even if your salary technically goes up. Now add rising rents or mortgage repayments on top. For the average household, this creates what economists call the cost of living squeeze, and for many, it's become unbearable. Every week, more families are being forced to make brutal decisions. Do we pay rent, buy groceries, or cover the electricity bill this month? And it's not just low-income earners feeling the heat. Middle-class Australians, once financially stable, are now using credit cards to cover essentials, dipping into savings, or taking on second jobs. The pressure is also having a major mental health impact. Anxiety, stress, and burnout are on the rise as people scramble to survive in a system that seems to be stacked against them. And here's the kicker. Without meaningful wage growth, people can't keep up with rising housing costs, no matter how hard they work. Owning a home becomes a distant dream. Renting becomes a constant struggle. In the end, the numbers don't lie. When your income stays flat, but everything else skyrockets, it's only a matter of time before the roof over your head is at risk. This video took hours of research and heart to create, so if it opened your eyes, let us know in the comments. What shocked you the most? And don't forget, supporting us takes just one click. Hit that subscribe button and help us keep these stories alive.
Number 4. Migration pressure. Australia has always been known as a welcoming country, and for good reason. In 2023 and 2024 alone, the nation saw one of the largest surges in migration in its history, with over 500,000 new arrivals in a single year. While migration brings huge long-term benefits, boosting the economy, filling skill gaps, and enriching our culture, it also brings short-term challenges. And right now, our housing system simply can't keep up. Every new arrival needs somewhere to live. But with construction delays, rising material costs, and a limited housing pipeline, there just aren't enough homes being built. The result? More people competing for fewer homes. This added pressure is driving rents even higher, especially in major cities like Sydney and Melbourne, where migrants often settle first. In some areas, it's become nearly impossible to find a rental property, even for long-time residents. It's important to understand, migrants aren't to blame for the housing crisis. They're victims of the same broken system. In fact, many are living in overcrowded, temporary, or insecure housing, struggling just like everyone else. But when population growth moves faster than housing supply, it creates a perfect storm of demand that the market simply can't handle. And if policies don't adapt quickly, by increasing housing supply, reforming rental laws, and investing in infrastructure, the pressure will only intensify. By 2026, we could be facing not just a housing shortage, but a full-blown housing emergency, where both new and existing Australians are left without a place to call home.
Number 5. Construction crisis. What happens when a country desperately needs homes, but no one can afford to build them? That's exactly the nightmare unfolding across Australia right now. The construction industry,
once booming, is now in serious trouble. Since 2022, dozens of major building companies have collapsed, including household names like ProBuild and Porter Davis. Why? Because the cost of materials, labor, and interest rates have surged faster than contracts could keep up. Bricks, timber, steel, everything costs more. Delays, labor shortages, and global supply chain issues have only made things worse. Many builders locked in fixed-price contracts before these cost hikes, meaning they had to finish homes at a loss. Eventually, the numbers just didn't add up, and they folded. And when construction companies go under, projects are left half-built, buyers are left in limbo, and housing supply grinds to a halt. Even developers who survive are now slowing down new builds, nervous about risks and rising interest rates. The dream of 1 million new homes by 2029? It's starting to look more like a fantasy. This crisis creates a brutal ripple effect. Fewer new homes means tighter supply. Tighter supply means higher prices. Higher prices mean more people pushed out of the market. It's a vicious cycle, and right now, there's no quick fix. Unless governments step in with urgent support for builders, faster approvals, and smarter planning, the construction slowdown will only deepen Australia's housing crisis. By 2026, we may not just face a shortage of homes, we could face a complete construction standstill, leaving thousands without a chance to buy, rent, or rebuild.
Number 6. Climate disasters and insurance retreat. What if your home survives a flood, but your insurance doesn't? For thousands of Australians, this is already a terrifying reality, and it's getting worse every year. Australia has been hit hard by a surge in extreme weather events, record-breaking bushfires, catastrophic floods, cyclones, and destructive storms. And climate scientists warn, this is just the beginning. In 2022 alone, the East Coast floods cost over $5 billion in damage, displacing tens of thousands of families. Many of those homes were never rebuilt. And here's the shocking part. Some were never insured at all. Why? Because insurance premiums in disaster-prone areas have skyrocketed. In parts of Queensland and northern NSW, home insurance now costs $4,000 to $6,000 a year. And even then, policies may exclude flood coverage. Where still, some insurers have pulled out entirely from high-risk regions, leaving entire communities without protection. If disaster strikes again, families are on their own. And who's at most risk? It's not millionaires in the city. It's the average family in rural or regional Australia, living near rivers, forests, or the coast, places now considered uninsurable. This means many Australians are one flood away from homelessness, not because they didn't prepare, but because the system has abandoned them. As climate change accelerates, more homes will become uninhabitable, uninsurable, and ultimately unlivable. And without urgent action from both government and industry, Australia could face a wave of climate refugees inside its own borders by 2026. Nature is changing fast, and if we don't protect people from its impact, millions could lose not just their homes, but their entire future.
Number 7. Airbnbs versus long-term housing. What if the house next door isn't for a family, but for weekend tourists? In many Australian towns and cities, that's exactly what's happening, and it's quietly devastating the rental market. The rise of short-term rental platforms like Airbnb and Stays has turned thousands of homes into holiday properties. What used to be permanent rentals for locals are now booked by travelers, influencers, and tourists, sometimes just for a night or two. In places like Byron Bay, Hobart, and coastal Victoria, entire neighborhoods are turning into ghost towns during the week, then tourist hotspots on weekends. Sounds like a smart way for owners to make money, right? Sure, but at what cost? When property investors pull homes off the long-term market to rent them short-term, it creates an artificial housing shortage.
Fewer homes available for locals equals higher rents and more competition. In Byron Bay, the average rent has doubled in under 5 years, and many locals, including essential workers like nurses and teachers, have had to move away because they simply can't afford to live where they work. Even in big cities, entire apartment blocks are being quietly converted into full-time Airbnb rentals. Meanwhile, renters are stuck attending crowded inspections and bidding over asking prices. Some councils are pushing back with tighter regulations, but enforcement is weak and loopholes are plenty. If this trend continues unchecked, many parts of Australia could become unlivable for the very people who keep these communities running. Tourism is vital, but so is housing. And by 2026, if more homes are rented to strangers than to Australians, we may have to ask, is our housing market serving people or profit?
Number 8. Ghost homes and property investors. How can we have a housing crisis when over 1 million homes sit empty? It sounds unbelievable, but it's true. According to the last census, over 1 million residential properties in Australia were unoccupied on census night. That's nearly 1 in every 10 homes. These so-called ghost homes are often owned by investors who don't live in them, don't rent them out, and sometimes don't even visit. Many are held as speculative assets, bought not to be lived in, but to grow in value. And while they sit locked up and dark, hundreds of thousands of Australians are struggling to find a place to live. In cities like Melbourne and Sydney, entire apartment towers have floors of unused units. Meanwhile, families are living in cars, couch surfing, or sleeping rough. Why does this happen? Because in many cases, it's more profitable to leave a home empty than to deal with the risks of renting, things like property damage, rental caps, or tenant rights. And there are few penalties for keeping a property vacant. Some cities have introduced vacancy taxes, but enforcement is weak, and the fines are often cheaper than renting the home out. This is a housing crisis not just of supply, but of access. We don't just need more homes, we need to make sure the homes we already have are being used. By 2026, if ghost homes remain untouched and investor incentives stay broken, we could see more empty properties than ever, while everyday Australians sleep outside their locked gates. It's time to ask, should a house be treated like a stock or a basic human right?
Number 9. Policy paralysis and political gridlock. Australia doesn't have a housing shortage problem, it has a leadership problem. While families are sleeping in cars and young Australians are giving up on the dream of owning a home, our leaders are stuck in a loop of blame, delays, and empty promises. Federal and state governments constantly point fingers at each other. The federal government blames state zoning laws. States blame lack of federal funding. Councils say their hands are tied. Meanwhile, nothing changes. Multiple housing plans have been launched with fancy names and big announcements, but most are either underfunded, too slow, or never fully delivered. Take the National Housing Accord, for example. The promise was 1 million new homes by 2029, but experts warn that labor shortages, rising construction costs, and bureaucratic red tape mean that goal may never be met. There's also a lack of bold reform. Vacancy taxes are too weak. Negative gearing remains untouched. Social housing investment is far below what's needed. Meanwhile, developers with deep pockets often have more say in policy than the people sleeping rough. And when action does happen, it's usually too little too late, like rental assistance increases that don't match the actual rent rises. It's not that we don't know what to do. Housing experts have been screaming solutions for years. Build more social and affordable housing. Reform tax laws that favor investors. Fast-track zoning and approvals. Enforce vacancy and Airbnb regulations. But without political will, none of it happens. If governments continue to treat housing like a PR problem rather than a national emergency, then by 2026, Australia's housing crisis could explode into a full-blown social disaster. Because when leadership stalls, real people pay the price.
Number 10. The growing homelessness epidemic. What does homelessness look like in 2025? It's not always a person sleeping on a park bench. Today, it's a mom working 2 jobs, living in her car with 2 kids. It's a pensioner couch surfing between relatives. It's a full-time worker living in a tent behind a warehouse. Homelessness in Australia has reached crisis levels, and it's spreading fast. Over 122,000 people are already homeless, and that number is expected to rise sharply by 2026. And no, it's not just about people with addiction or mental illness. That's a myth. More and more, we're seeing working homeless, people with jobs, incomes, even families, but nowhere to live. Rents are unaffordable. Social housing wait lists are years long. Crisis shelters are overwhelmed, and there simply aren't enough affordable homes for people to move into. Here's the scary part. Once someone becomes homeless, it becomes incredibly hard to escape. Without an address, you can't get a job. Without a job, you can't rent. And the cycle locks people in. Children growing up in unstable housing face higher risks of dropping out of school, suffering from poor health, and repeating the cycle of poverty. And yet, despite the rising numbers, funding for homelessness services remains inadequate. Support workers are burnt out, emergency accommodation is overflowing, and while the government debates policy, thousands are left out in the cold, literally. If we don't act now, experts warn that Australia could see homelessness double by 2026. Because this isn't just a statistic, it's a human tragedy unfolding in plain sight. And the question we all have to ask is, how did one of the world's richest countries let this happen? Australia is facing a housing crisis like never before, and it's not just one issue causing it. It's a perfect storm of rising interest rates, unaffordable rents, stalled construction, climate disasters, investor greed, political inaction, and deepening inequality. Behind every statistic is a real person. A single parent skipping meals to pay rent, a retiree fearing eviction, or a young couple giving up on the dream of home ownership. And if things don't change, millions more could lose their homes by 2026. This isn't a problem for someone else. It's a crisis that affects everyone, from renters and homeowners to future generations. But here's the thing. It's not too late. We still have time to change direction, but only if we stop treating housing like a commodity and start treating it like the human right it truly is. The next few years will define whether we build a more equal, sustainable housing future or allow millions to be left behind. So the question is, what do we do now? To prevent a full-blown housing disaster by 2026, we need bold, urgent action from governments, industry, and communities. Here's what experts say must happen. 1. Massive investment in social and affordable housing. We need at least 25,000 social and affordable homes every year. This provides safe shelter for the most vulnerable and relieves pressure on the private rental market. 2. Tax reform to reduce investor domination. Reform negative gearing and capital gains tax discounts that currently reward property hoarding. This will help level the playing field for first home buyers and reduce speculative investment. 3. Vacancy and Airbnb regulation. Introduce and enforce stronger vacancy taxes on empty homes. Limit full-time short-term rentals in housing-strapped regions so locals aren't pushed out of their own communities. 4. Faster planning and approval systems. Slash red tape and fast-track developments that include affordable and sustainable housing. Encourage build-to-rent projects and community-led developments. 5. Rent controls and tenant protections. Implement fair rent caps, limit no-cause evictions, and provide legal support for tenants. Everyone deserves a stable, secure place to live. 6. Support for homelessness services. Boost funding for crisis accommodation,
outreach programs, and long-term support services to help people escape the homelessness cycle. Before you scroll away, we want to hear from you. What's happening in your area? Are you seeing the housing crisis firsthand? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters. And if you found this eye-opening, check out our last video where we uncovered how Australia's rental crisis got this bad. We pour countless hours into every video, so if you believe this story needs to be told, support us with just one click. Subscribe now. It truly means the world.